It's good, Majestic.
So I want this conversation, I know this format is very different, but everyone should feel free to, treat this like a conversation amongst friends. It doesn't have to feel like a Q&A or an interview. When we last spoke about this conversation, I had a general plan about what we were going to talk about and how and when, and all of that is gone. All of that is out the window. I have absolutely nothing planned. I have nothing written down. I don't have notes. But I think we could start with each of you introducing yourselves. You can go Davie, TALAYA, ARTINA, and then I'll go.
Okay. I'm Davie Ross. I use she, her pronouns. I'm just going to say that for the recording. And I am 18. I'm a graduating senior. I'm here to represent the senior experience in 2020, as it's definitely not one that's typical, usual, or expected. Yeah, and I'm a grassroots organizer from Burien, or South Seattle, because people don't tend to know where Burien is. So yeah, I'm just here to listen and talk.
TALAYA, you can go.
Hi everyone, my name is TALAYA. I am a audio engineer and artist, and I also did a lot of activism work in my past, but I'm sort of getting back into it, and just as my duty. I don't really carry it as a title. It's just, being a Black woman in America, I feel that I need to be aware to help others and care for others, and that's why I'm here today. I just want to talk and just share space with other people that are experiencing this crazy time revolution that we're in. So hi, thanks for having me.
I'm Artina Daniels. I'm a junior currently at the University of Washington. I'm currently studying scenic design and minoring in film. I do have a couple of films that I'm doing on the side right now that focus on social justice issues and other social issues amongst different minorities and ethnicities in the US. And I'm just here to listen and see what everybody else is going through, and maybe hear about some positive stuff and what people are doing right now, and maybe how I can participate in the positive things that are going on in 2020.
My name is MAJESTIK REMMU, he, him pronouns. Also a musician, producer, composer. I've been helping BLM mostly with their social media, and just doing what I can to help organize and strategize any upcoming events and help promote the agenda for Black people in Seattle and King County. So things are weird. Things were already weird, and then things got really, really weird. For each of us, I think, and I want you guys to speak on this for yourselves, but part of the reason why I wanted the three of you is I wanted Davie, I wanted a graduating senior, I wanted a college student, and I wanted a young artist of color. Each of us have been affected by quarantine and the events of this past week and a half differently, and in similar ways. So how about we start with, let's just start with Davie, because I want this conversation to be, I know the three of you, I know how ridiculously smart you are, and I know that we are capable of having conversations at the adult level, but I think it's important while we're here together to talk about things from our perspective as young people, and make sure that that is like the context of the discussion, if that makes sense. So I want to prioritize, like, for example, the experience that Davie is going through right now, and we'll go from there. So Davie, if you want to talk about how you're doing, what the past few months have been like for you, and what you're doing to take care of yourself, and yeah.
So yeah, thanks Madge for asking. I mean, we had a little bit like a short conversation about this, but I am a graduating senior. I am actually graduating officially tomorrow, so this is kind of, it's a nice way to like bring that in and remind me like, hey, there's something to look forward to right now. Especially as an organizer, it is difficult to be positive and even want to graduate right now because I feel like there's so many other more important things in my life that I need to devote my time to. And especially as a non-Black POC, like I think that being worried about graduation and being sad about graduation is so minute in comparison. And I know that I shouldn't like invalidate that experience, but the Black experience in America right now is just, it's so much bigger and nuclear in comparison. So it's been difficult to remind myself like, hey, it's okay to celebrate graduation. It's okay to be happy and be with your parents and take a few days to prepare this, to go into this like next part of my life. I've been trying to constantly remind myself of that. So I'm happy to like take this time and this space to use that as like a reminder to say, hey, I'm going into graduation tomorrow. I am going to go like walk across that stage or whatever like makeshift stage they have, and I'm going to smile and try to be happy. Yeah. So that's, I guess, been the past week or so, just dealing with the interaction between, again, being an organizer and an activist and a graduating senior. But as far as like the past month or before, like everything just unraveled with George Floyd, and even before that, Ahmaud Arbery and Breonna Taylor, of course, like it was, I hit like a part of my life where I wasn't really doing the work that I had been doing while school was going on. I didn't have a regular routine. So when everything just hit almost at the same time or like sequentially, I think a lot of people can speak to this. It's like it was really overwhelming because you're going from a time where you feel like you're not doing anything on a day-to-day basis or you're doing bare minimum to a time where you have call after call after call with fellow activists and organizers, going to protests and march after staying at home for days on end, working with the immune system and the hesitancy around like COVID as well. Like in those environments, like it is like overwhelming and all powerful, but it definitely has woken me up to what this summer is going to be. And it again like was another type of reminder for reminder to use like this transition after high school to continue my work that I've been doing throughout high school. Like it doesn't just stop because I graduate. Yeah, so I think that's the extent of what's been on my mind. It's a lot to juggle. Yeah.
I wanted to speak to something. Oh, go ahead.
No, you're good. Go ahead. I didn't really know what I was going to say.
I wanted to speak to something that you said earlier, like don't feel like you have to void yourself of happiness or like enjoying your graduation or like you have to hide your smile and joy just because you know like the world is falling apart, you know, like it's not your fault that the world is falling apart. It's not your fault that the world is this way. So, you know, and even if it somehow magically happened to be your fault, you know, you still deserve to be happy and have a graduation, you know what I'm saying? And just enjoy being around your family. So go out and smile, laugh in the supremacist face, girl. If you want to laugh at somebody, laugh at them.
Period.
There are some at my school. That's like been another thing is, you know, graduation, you're leading up to like this end with classmates that you've been with. Some of them I've been with like outside of these 4 years, and talking about like silence is compliance. I've seen a lot of silence out of my school. These are people like in my class that I thought I knew. So that's just been like another layer. It's like these are people that I thought I was excited to graduate alongside, and now they're people that I know like I didn't actually know. Yeah, so that's been another thing. I know you're like saying to be happy. I'm like, there's all these people around me that I hope can feel like the influence that we're bringing to the table right now, but you can't force some people. So yeah.
Yeah.
It's rough.
Yeah, that's a very surreal realization. Is, you know, I've been going through that too, and just seeing all the, you know, throughout high school, you're in this bubble with your peers and your teachers, and you get to have conversations about what the world is like, sort of from an inside out perspective, not like a look around us. It's more like a look out the door. You know, that's what we're going towards. And we think we're surrounded by like-minded people, and it's very weird to see people choose to stay silent or you know, leave me on scene when I tell them about a petition or something. And it's like, wow, like, you know, I thought we were the generation. You know, what happened to everything we talked about we were going to do? And it's heartbreaking to realize, you know, you might have less support around you than you thought, like genuine support, long-term support, and allies, and in trying to make change happen. And it's part of it is sad, and part of it is kind of like a weight off your shoulders. You know, it's like, you know, you can tell who's who, you know, who's really in this with us, whether it's just for people like our generation, whether it's for Black people, whether it's, you know, for anything. So I've decided to just be reassured, because I know, like, the three of you, I know you're like genuine about it, you know. But I thought I had a question, but I didn't. Talaya, talk a little bit about what it's been like for you as an artist in the city. I've seen, you know, we both seen, once the shows stop, the industry basically just pauses. So how have you kept your work going? How have you kept yourself healthy in studio sessions? Jesus Christ.
Sorry,
Do you guys hear that?
Yeah, that was amazing.
How much of your work, how have you had to balance music and this new, like, workload of outdoor activism and work? How are you doing with everything?
Okay. Sorry, I'm just gathering my thoughts. And I've also been typing. I'm just kind of taking notes and writing down questions as I have them. It's been good. Surprisingly, it's actually really increased, because, like you said, Davie, like before everything kind of exploded on itself, it felt like I wasn't really doing anything, but I was doing a lot. Like a lot of my work was personal. Like I would just work on my own stuff. And then once COVID really hit, like towards the end of it, right before the death of George Floyd and like all the protests, people were starting to hit me up, starting to ask to come in and have sessions. And so I kind of just formed a system of getting Clorox wipes and just wiping down every single surface that I think someone would touch, every instrument I use before and after sessions and in between clients, wiping down headphones, spraying hand sanitizer on you, like the earmuffs, things like that, to really stay safe. Having everyone wash their hands. If I have more than 3 people, distancing them like on opposite ends of the room. I always keep clients like pretty far away from me. So that's been really good. And so far everyone's been healthy. Like there haven't been any issues or incidents. And at first it was nerve-wracking, because I was like, there's just no way that I can wear a mask for an entire session. Like it's just not doable. It gets hot, like you get excited, be breathing hard, like it's a lot. So that was interesting to balance, but it's been good. And but yeah, like once the first, it's so weird thinking of the concept of time. Like it's felt like it's been 5 weeks, and it's only been, how long has it been? Like a week or two, like since everything, like, I think it's been about 2 weeks.
Yeah,
that's true.
It just feels like it's been 2 months. Like it feels like every day has been slow motion, especially that first week. I remember the first protest on Saturday, the first one I went to at Westlake. It just feels so long ago. But yeah, that weekend I couldn't make any music. I just couldn't even bring myself. I took off of the studio for a few days, and just tried to collect my thoughts. And what I realized was that doing nothing is okay as long as you don't keep doing nothing. Like, when you think about the ratio of people who were like in the civil rights era, the ratio of Black people who were protesting compared to how many Black people there were in the country, it was a very small number. People who were actively protesting, and there were a lot of people who had to just continue working, had to continue supporting their families, or continue building their businesses, or there was a lot of people who couldn't directly like partake in activism, and that's still true for today's society. So I feel like I went through that guilt of like, wow, I should not be creating right now. Like, this doesn't feel right. Like, I shouldn't be, you know, having fun when people are being brutalized in the streets. But if I realized, like, if I can't keep going and if I can't keep myself sane and healthy, I can't help anybody else. It would be, it doesn't matter. If I'm burnt out and sad and depressed and bitter and angry, you can't do the work that you need to. You can't communicate properly. You can't sleep. You can't be as efficient. So you have to do those things to like love on yourself and keep your hope alive. And I'm sorry, that might not have been the right tone to use, but like, that's just what I realized about myself. And so since then, I've had a surge in creativity. Like, I wasn't making beats for months, and I finally have been able to like actually make some things, and just like you said, like just laughing in the face of supremacy, Artina, what you said, like that's what it feels like. It's like they want us to be sad and depressed and not have joy and feel oppressed, but we don't have to act that way. We just have to actively fight against it. So yeah, and also I really believe there's going to be a musical renaissance. Like,
Yes.
every single client I've had has been just killing their song. Like, just, it's been so amazing to get to hear all of these new songs and ideas before they hit the world. Like, people are really on a wave, and like, just these recent events have like lit a fire under so many artists, and it's going to be a beautiful thing to see. Did I answer all your questions?
Yeah, no, you're good. You're good. I wanted you guys, either of you have any questions for Talaya?
I just felt your point. Oh, I'm sorry, Davie. Man, I talk a lot, so don't let me cut you off.
We were all talking.
We're all talking. No, I just wanted, like, at the end, I definitely have felt like the like creative side of things, everything just like there's inspiration everywhere. Because of just this swarm of like emotions that have hit our communities.
Yeah.
And I feel like those emotions are really, they're getting to people that you've never seen come out into the streets before. And even that reaction, the visceral reaction of people who've been so silent or so quiet or just not there for so long. I was at a protest this Saturday that my like youth council helped organize, and one speaker just like cried out like thank you to that like response, and even though it might be like a too late response, it's still there. And I definitely, like, as a creative, I felt that as well. It's like a finally they're here type
yeah
thing. Yeah, because at the beginning of this year, my friends and I hosted a march that was like attended by like 60 people, and we advertised it for a month, and we reached out to different people. We tried to have we just like exercise our networks to the like greatest of our abilities, and 60 people was as much as we could get at like the Rainier Beach Community Center. And today, if we were to host that same march, like I don't even know how many people we could get. Like it would
probably
be
6,000.
Yeah. Just I really hope that that momentum can maintain itself and manifest itself in things like creative networks, because I can definitely see like people looking back on the stage through photographs, through music, through painting. Yeah, there's so many ways that we can just manifest and preserve what's going on right now.
Artina, you think you were going to say something?
I think I was just gonna say something. Oh yeah. It was just relevant to I had this conversation with my mom because she called me yesterday and she was like, "Hey Tina, stay out of Capitol Hill because there's some white supremacist marches going on." And I said something along the lines of, was like, "Okay, well, that don't mean stop, you know, like to Talaya's point, you know, which is like, they want us to stop, they want us to be sad, they want us to be depressed. And I'm like, nah, Mom, this is what's gonna fuel us. And she was like, all right then, say less. I was like, all right, Mom. So, but that was, yeah, I think you already covered it, Talaya, so.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, I really understand like what you're saying, Davie. Like I felt that rage in high school. Like my whole high school career, I think I got too angry and I burnt myself out. Like I was doing forums and teach-ins and all the events and the things and just trying to get people to understand like, hey, we have a problem. But timing is everything. And George Floyd was just the straw that broke the camel's back. And I know people have been saying that over and over, but it's unfortunate. It's really unfortunate that it takes something so public and brutal to like bring the whole world to a collective thought of like, okay, this is not right. But also it's like in the darkness and just the brutality of it all, there's so much beauty and light. Like just when we were talking about music, I went to the march at Rainier Beach, the We Want to Live march this past weekend, and I have never seen that many people ever in Rainier Beach. I've lived there, been there my whole life. Like I didn't even know that many people would care, and it was beautiful. But there's this guy who was playing a trumpet and people were chanting defund SPD, and he was like, he took over because the guy's voice got tired. You know how that is when people are leading chants, and the guy on the trumpet was just playing it and everyone knew what to say, and it was just so powerful. Like one of the girls was like, how's he doing that? Like he's not even saying the words. And like it's just something so small. And even there's like a Garifuna band and they're playing their music and just really like pumping people up, keeping them energized. Like music is what's going to continue to drive this movement. And I think especially once there's this new, like Buddy is dropping Black 2, his song. The first one, everybody was hyped. It's a great song. Majestic knows. He's like, yeah, that's my song. But sorry, I'm ranting. But just music is so powerful. And I feel like once we get this next surge, it's going to fuel the momentum that's still going on from the protests.
Facts. Artina, talk about what everything has been like for you, however you can, because we've had this discussion about how you as a student, as a college student, how your life has shifted. So talk about what that was like initially and what it was like for you this past week and a half, and how you've been balancing, like you said, you've been working on finals and whatnot. So talk about what your experience has been and how you've been taking care of yourself.
Yeah, so way back, and I'm a theater major, right? And I had just gotten into set design, and I just started designing a show for the School of Drama. It's called Alice in Black and White. And I had been working on it since like December, and then you're having the meetings and you're like, all right, this is the design, this is how each scene is gonna look. We sat down, I had my little scale ruler and was measuring stuff out, put things into like computer generated images, just like submitted the final design to the School of Drama and gotten it approved. And then all of a sudden spring break hits, and it's like, or those last 2 weeks before the end of winter quarter, I think, was when everything kind of shut down. And it was like, yeah, we're gonna have to temporarily cancel all the shows, like I think it was in February. I may have the dates mixed up, but either way, a bunch of shows kept getting canceled, week to week. You kept getting emails like, oh, this is canceled, this is canceled. Then it finally got to my show, and I was like, all right, this is looking kind of canceled. So, and then they canceled it, and then like my position kind of became obsolete as the designer because they decided to switch the show to audio. And there's no scene for you to design at that point. So that was a little disappointing because I was so excited about it, after doing mechanical engineering for 2 years and then finally switching it around and feeling like you found your path and getting your foot in the door was like, dang, all right, well, I was really hoping to add that to a portfolio, but we'll try again whenever things decide to open up. So, which has also been a stress on my mind because my career path is heavily portfolio based. And it worries me that I feel like I may have to stunt building a portfolio for 2 years or so, or whenever they happen to get this under control and open up theaters again. So that was that as far as COVID went. Like my grandpa caught it and we were all really worried about him. My study abroad got canceled and it was just like, it was a whole big mess, I think around the January or February time, but everything worked itself out, as it does. So as far as COVID goes, it was, typical stuff. I was getting used to it. My knees hurt for the first 2 weeks. I've been sitting down on couches all day. I ended up getting used to that. So it was pretty easy. I was like, all right, well, I can still do class, everything. I'm actually enjoying Zoom, a little bit more once it hit like the third or fourth week. And school was going okay. And before this, right, like the week before this, I had started a new film, and it was going to be essentially a campaign that requested that the University of Washington have all their classes filmed, because most of the classes that are filmed are like in the STEM department. But in the drama department where I take classes, the classes are not filmed. And I had one of my classmates tell me her story about, she has vitiligo, but she has a very severe form of it. And for those of you who don't know, vitiligo is when you get like really light spots on your skin. It's essentially your body sees melanin as a foreign thing. So your immune system is constantly eating away at your melanin. So these people tend to be really pale. It's what Michael Jackson had. That's why all of his color left. So for her, she was explaining how she requires herd immunity because she can't get vaccinated for certain things because her immune system just can't handle it. She was in the hospital for the flu for months. She had to take off from school because she just can't do it. So I was going to do a campaign video that essentially highlighted everybody who was immunocompromised on campus, and kind of get their stories out. And just like some general population data, and then also get the stories of the international students that are here on campus, because they have a lot of flight restrictions and visa terminations and stuff like that, those issues. So I was feeling pretty energized. I was like, all right, me and school are good. I got a new film project to work on since my theater thing got debunked. And then George Floyd dies. And then once that hit, it was controlling my anger at that point, because it was just like, at that point, I really couldn't focus on anything. I'm very thankful for the University of Washington for making some, great adjustments, and my teachers canceling finals left and right. But yeah, once that George Floyd thing hit, everything kind of went out the window. I'm like, it was rough, and like I've been working on this textbook, to try and write, on top of the video, write a textbook that covers more histories than just Eurocentric histories. And I went and re-spoke to my professor that I had talked to about it before the whole George Floyd incident. And I was trying to tell him, I said, teach, it's so hard to be peaceful right now, because I like to take the approach of educating people instead of, like, I don't know, to me, I feel like it's, if you get them young, then they won't turn out to be the people that encourage these systems, right, of oppression. But in that after class, that I was trying to talk to him, just be like, hey, so how can I do this peacefully? And I just couldn't contain all my tears, and I was crying and I was ranting to my poor teacher, and he was like, I don't know how to handle this situation. But bless his little heart, he listened the best he could, and one of the things that stood out to me from this conversation was he was like, Artina, don't give up on like what you're trying to do, still trying to educate people and stuff like that, and change will come. And I said, teach, it's hard to wait for change, and try and take the slow route for change when you could lose a family member or a friend, because of this oppressive system and stuff like that. And he was like, well, I can't say anything to that. And, after that, it was just like, man, I don't know what to do, and it's just, I don't mean to ramble, but this last week, it's just been like, man, I don't know what to do with everything, and I'm a big person who's like, well, I don't like to, I don't like to, when I read the news or watch the news or look at information and stuff like that, I try to look at all different sides of things, so I tried today to look at some people who were against Black Lives Matter and labeled it, you know, a radicalist movement and all that kind of stuff, just to understand what the other side was saying. And I was like, I'm not the one, I wasn't blessed to listen to the other side, with the patience to listen to the other side of this particular debate. So it just like, it's rough, man. So on top of finals and all of that, I mean, bless my teachers, you know, they've made it really easy. So finals haven't really been that much of an issue. They're just kind of in the back of my brain, like, oh, don't forget to do that. But yeah, man, it's been an experience, you know. It's been a roller coaster. I'm ready to go home. As I told Majestic, I got a beekeeper suit on the way. I'm gonna go do some yard work. I'm excited about it. So I just want to pretend the world doesn't exist for like a week, and then I'll come back.
I feel that 1,000%. I definitely forgot, and I don't want to just address that one thing because you said a lot there that is worth discussing, but I definitely forgot the importance, and we talked about it earlier, the importance of taking breaks. Like Artina, me and you talked about having balance. Davie, we talked about having balance. And it just, I think with like that anger that I felt and that sadness that I felt, and then this sudden rush of work, I was put in a position to where I was just going 1,000 miles per hour trying to help any way I could. And then it all just caught up to me and I just crashed. You know, it's like when you get a lot of inspiration, you're just creating, and then you're just like, wait, I have to sleep right now or I'm gonna die. So I've had those moments where it's like I'm getting the mail or something, and then I stop and I look around. And I live on top of a hill, so I just kind of look out at where we live, and I'm like, you know, it is kind of a sunny day. Maybe I could just take 2 minutes to just close my eyes and just not look at my phone and just pause this rush of information, and take care of myself. So that adjustment has been very necessary because I don't remember who said it, but I have no idea what the summer is going to look like. You know, nobody knows what this, all of this rush of protests and in-person gatherings, what effect that'll have on COVID-19, and whether or not that'll change where the state of Washington was trending and whether things will go back, you know, the other direction, or, you know, we have no idea what summer's going to look like. We don't know what the outcomes of all this work is going to look like yet. Hopefully we'll have better, at the time of recording this, I mean, at the time people are watching it, hopefully things are actually happening and it's not just this week by week continuance of just rage, you know, and whatnot. But I forgot to mention earlier, I think at about 7 o'clock, we'll be being joined by Dr. Benjamin Danielson, who is who's my doctor. He's a world-renowned clinical professor and healthcare practitioner. And if either of you have any questions that you want to think about or prepare for him, at first, the conversation was mostly just going to be about mental health in quarantine and what COVID-19 is. But, you know, that conversation should expand to just mental health in general and the just list of things that we just talked about that we've each been going through. So definitely take advantage of his ear. He's a great man to talk to about things like this. I'll just say again, I have absolutely no plan for this conversation. Any of you have any things that you've thought of today when I was, you know, confirming that this was going to happen? Any things that you've thought of throughout the week of like, oh, we should talk about this together?
I do.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, first of all, I just want to say I'm really proud of Minnesota. Like, I'm sure you guys have been keeping your eyes on them, and they were like, we're not doing this. Like, that's literally, they were just like, we're just not going to do it. And it was funny. I hate to see, you know, like, yes, the police department is full of people. It's a bunch of men, mostly white men for the most part. that are really upset that they might lose their jobs. Like, they don't really have anywhere to go per se, but it's like, it's really hard to be sympathetic when we've seen time and time again what happens when it only takes a few hours to train someone, give them a gun, and say that they're in charge of thousands of citizens to protect them and serve them without any kind of vetting, really, to see if there's bias or whatever the case may be. But I kind of want to just talk about, like, what are some ideas that you guys would have in place of the traditional police system we have? Like, every time someone, usually it's an older person, they're like, abolish, what does abolish mean? Why we need police? And my answer to that is always like, well, why can't we, like, have elected officials? Why can't we elect an officer per neighborhood and have live trials like C-SPAN, where we can just tune in and watch, and have a committee of civilians that are the judge of the cases or whatever? So I don't know, that's just my idea, but I'm curious to hear the ideas that you guys have of alternatives to our current police system.
I definitely, I was sitting on with my youth council over the past year. We tried to do the whole community advisory coalition type thing where, you sit down with the chief of police or whomever is in charge or able to go to that monthly or weekly meeting. And it started out with a lot of community partners at the table, and every meeting after that, people dropped off because we weren't seeing a difference in the small Burien Police Department, but in the police department. And I think a lot of that is because of the way that's structured, at least in King County, because what the county is able to do is move officers around or move police chiefs around and put them in areas where they're not from, where the majority or all the populations around them or demographics they don't represent, as we know, because they're predominantly male and predominantly white, and they're over policing communities of color, that they don't know the people that are living there, and they're not there for a long time beforehand for their training. And when I made this connection, it's in the Catholic Church, how they have this huge issue with sexual assault with priests, because they can literally move priests around whenever they have an issue or a complaint from any other parishioners. The same thing happens with the police. People are just moved around because they're part of this overarching system. So I think, like you say, having police that are not just representative, but from the areas that they're policing, so they know people, and having social workers, mental health resources, restorative justice organizations like Choose 180 intervene before any crimes are committed. That's the whole idea. We want to have a world where we can prevent crimes from even occurring, and that has to do with stunting poverty cycles within communities of color, so creating more job opportunities and job access, making sure homelessness is not an issue for people, which it is so overpowering and pervasive in Seattle, because our mayor doesn't do enough to use the funds that are there. There's literally millions of dollars that Seattle City government is sitting on that isn't going towards providing actual housing, because it's a housing scarcity issue as well, and a housing affordability issue. There's obviously you can say have community policing, but we want to get to the point where community policing can just be used as an intervention method, not a put someone in jail method. Yeah.
I really agree with you. The last step and not the first. Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. And I also something that I had a conversation with someone about is obviously demilitarize the police to the fullest extent, but in a country where guns are just part of the culture, and I hate to say that, I would love to see the Second Amendment just taken out, omitted completely, but once that happens, they're just going to go underground a lot of the time. Those guns are not going to be able to be tracked, and many of them aren't, because serial numbers are they're easy to just file off. So I know that like I can see that part of the discussion. I can see like if someone is there to protect, they need to be able to actually protect themselves and others. But that requires us, if we truly want to have a 100% demilitarized police department or policing system, then we need to have a demilitarized US culture. And that's something that I have been like struggling to like find solutions for, because what do we do with gun culture? And I hate like even calling it like a culture, but like it has, people love their Second Amendment, they just do. And yeah, it's bad because it affects us like at all levels, like school shootings and whatnot. Like that's a huge reason with SROs, student resource officers. The majority response that I've gotten from people who want to keep SROs in schools have been those who are like, well, don't we want those for school shooters? Like, don't we want people to protect us if there are people on campus who are going to harm us? Like, and that means that we need to take all the guns out of the equation because that's the common denominator.
Yep.
Yeah.
You would think that like we would have done something at Sandy Hook. Like I feel like that was the worst mistake in America. Like that's when it should have been like, okay, enough is enough. Because like, I mean, you know, there's places like Japan and I think Australia that don't have guns, and they say, well, the stabbing rate is higher in like the UK, and it's like, yeah, that may be, but it's really hard to stab 100 people versus to shoot 100 people with you know, magazine clip. Like it's just common sense. And I think that the biggest, like the root of all evil in America is just wealth. It all comes down to money. It's like so many people right now are making money off of other people's suffering or other people being oppressed. Like you said, other people not having resources, feeding into poverty cycles. And just the fact that like that there's a price on the heads of people that are incarcerated should be like the first thing that we get rid of, because that's the only reason why the system is the way it is, to get people in those beds and make money off of privatized prisons and keep those extremely wealthy people wealthy. So
Yeah.
we just have to flip the whole system on its head. It's time.
Yeah. And it's not going to, I think like a big thing as well as like the patience aspect of it's like it is going to take a while to do that. It might not even happen like in our lifetime. I mean, we're seeing a lot more change happen in short amounts of time right now because so many people are just coming forth, but a lot of those people can't vote. Like a lot of people are 16 and 17-year-olds and pre-registered, or maybe not. A lot of those people may be a voting age, but it hasn't been, you know, handed down by parents because their parents might be undocumented, or their parents might just like my mom personally, like she didn't vote in the Philippines, she doesn't vote here, like it's just not part of the culture and the upbringing. So trying to change things, I know like Maj is like always talking about like voting on his stories like on Insta, like it's so important, but it's also difficult because I understand voting apathy. Like I understand why people are like, my vote doesn't matter, it doesn't count, and I want to be educated on it, but I don't know where to start because it wasn't handed down, it's not taught in schools. That's another part. Like I think a long-term place where we can really see change is like Artina was saying, like in education, like fighting for ethnic studies at all grade levels. Like a student is never too young to start learning about race, especially because that's at the heart of all of these issues. Race and class, they're interchangeable because people see them as interchangeable. They were intended to be interchangeable.
And I feel like bullying starts before we're even old enough to realize, like, you know, you can think on one hand how many people you know, or if not yourself, who was bullied like when you're 5 or 6, like you don't know why they won't play with you, but they just won't. And then it's like, oh, well, you're too young to know about that. But it's like, it's really not.
And then you look back on it and you're like, oh, whoa, that's like trauma. And then you don't understand it at the time. And then it just results, like the amount of internalized racism that I've seen within like my own household and within myself from a young age, like and so many around me as well, the want to be white and not even being able to recognize that. Yeah, we should be able to identify and be honest to youth about that, be honest to kids about it.
Yeah, education, definitely. I'm definitely starting to see just people, not even just people our age, but grown adults who have gone through the traditional American indoctrination of just and they're just stuck in that. They're too far gone to go back and be like, wait, so this isn't how the world works. And they won't. Most of them won't let a 19-year-old tell them that they're wrong about the world. But it's heartbreaking. Like growing up in Kent, which is like top 15, top 10 most diverse cities in America. It only takes, I've seen these interactions between just so many different groups of people. It only takes like a bad experience and a half with someone that looks different than you to be like, I don't like people that look like that. And it's just like, why are you talking about them that way? It's because they're Mexican. Mexicans are like this, or they're this, and they're like this. And it's like we are like 15 years old. Like, can we just relax and like maybe let's not develop these, because once they're there, they're so hard to get people out of that and then choose to look at people differently. So definitely education, which is why I was really excited when I heard about the textbook that ARTINA was planning to write, and I want to help in any way that I can, because I think that's just it's so necessary. Children have to be taught, not just in high school, but like children have to be introduced to the world that they're actually in, especially children, especially white children. They have to be made aware, because most of their parents are not going to tell them these things. So schools have to be a place.
Interact with that.
Schools have to be a place where they can be like, oh, because history class is just so repetitive. It's just like it's the same thing every history class at every level. Elementary, if you're learning basic history, middle school, high school, it's just the words you use become bigger, but we just learn the same exact things. So yeah, I think that is one of those in our lifetime things we can do that will for sure outlive us.
I feel that. My mom has a coworker, and she is white and her husband is Nigerian, so her kids are mixed. And she's like, well, we don't see color. I'm like, are you serious? Like, she literally she's like, I teach my kids not to see color. And my mom is just like,
so dangerous.
It doesn't matter. Like, just because you don't see it doesn't mean they won't. Like, you can be as light as you want to be. You can be cream colored, but if you have any sort of curl, like any indication that you're not white, like, you are at risk of anything, of racial profiling, of discrimination, of anything. And it's just like, so like you said, education is the key. Like, I was fortunate enough to learn a lot of history in high school, and that's why I was so angry. Like, we had the IB program and they shoved it down our throats, but we did learn a lot about whiteness and imperialism that we probably otherwise wouldn't have gotten with regular history. But I just feel like that shouldn't be a advanced topic or an advanced subject. Like, everyone should be able to read about a little bit of themselves in one way or another in history.
Yeah, I agree. I was having this conversation the other day, and I was like, I feel like we don't need to learn about the Aztecs and Mesopotamia and like all those other like early civilizations and stuff. And I was like, we could spend that time learning about our own history, and I'm just like, and my friend was like, well, that stuff's cool to learn about. And I said, that's a YouTube video, like that you go check out on the side, or a documentary that you go watch on the side. But like, the curriculum is tight knit as it is. Teachers are always complaining, well, there's not enough time to teach this. There's not enough time to teach this. Teach them the important things, not something that doesn't exist anymore. It's important, but not unless you're trying to be an archaeologist.
I think, sorry to interrupt. I was just going to say, this conversation is going a lot faster than I expected it to. And Dr. Danielson should be joining in about 5 minutes, but you can go ahead.
I just think, like, a lot of the reason why teachers, because you hear that excuse so much. It's like, we only have, especially in like AP classes, like we only have this many like months, like we have to like cover these things. And I feel like you spend, even when you do talk about things like slavery and the history or the context of America, like it wasn't recorded by slaves, or at least not in these textbooks, because it wasn't recorded in the language that was predominant in America or accepted. And you just see that carry through. And I think that response or that excuse is just, it's a new version of like exclusion in history textbooks. And it's because history textbooks predominantly are produced by white men. I'm going to college, and one of my majors is going to be history, because I want to represent in that field. And I want to make sure to hold like whatever white male professors I have in history, which I've like checked the list, it's going to be a lot. I want to make sure to hold them accountable and make sure they're talking about race and educating themselves about race in the classroom, not just leaving it for the few Black professors or professors of color in other departments to talk about, and like diversity and inclusion efforts, because it should be a part of every single classroom conversation. It doesn't matter what department you're in. But yeah, I hate that excuse. I hate it.
Yeah. I've had a horrible issue with the history textbook that we're reading for our drama class right now. And to sum up my biggest issue with it, we looked at this French Egyptologist who was looking at, like Egyptian civilizations and stuff like that. And one of the quotes he said was that one of the glories of being a historian is that you get to write the narratives for people who don't have the opportunity to, or who aren't here to. And I said, I think I was the only one truly infuriated by that quote that my teacher shared. And he shared it as if it was some sort of like inspirational thing. And I'm like, no, you don't understand. Like, as an African American whose history is practically non-existent except for slavery, civil rights, and then a few other tokens that they decided to throw in the textbook, it's not okay to feel so entitled that you think your rendition or interpretation of my history, or what you find important to record in history, is something that should be shared, or like, it just, that quote there was so infuriating. You're essentially giving yourself an excuse to not research all these other ethnicities and identities in America. And you're also, like, I lost my train of thought because that quote had me so hot, y'all. I was mad for 2 days. I was like, I cannot believe somebody said that, Oh, and it also gives you the excuse to not just record history incorrectly, man. Like, I may have already said that, but like, you're not doing enough research, and you're telling it from your own perspective, and it's just, it's infuriating. It really is. And I'm just like, I think we need to examine how we record history and how we present history all together, because it's just, y'all, that quote had me so mad. It just, I'm sorry, I'm losing my train of thought, because I think back to everything, all my issues with this particular textbook. This guy was describing other ethnicities and cultures' theater as primitive, and he was comparing that. Yes. he was comparing, like, theatrical history to like cultural Darwinism, which is essentially like, cultural Darwinism is just like, oh, okay, your culture is evolving as like your civilization or community evolves or whatever. And he was essentially saying, once you move out of believing in religion, right, and start to make your own thoughts and identities or whatever as a community, then you become evolved. And I was like, what kind of definition is that? Like, you're excluding hundreds of thousands of cultures just by debunking their religion, And then the book proceeded to say that Christianity was, like, essentially any theater that utilized Christianity in their theater was still autonomous and didn't include religion and was still considered an advanced civilization. And I was like, no, I don't have time for your Eurocentrism. Y'all see why I was fired up? This one,
Girl, I'm
I'm
sorry.
telling you, me and this textbook have so much beef.
You and this textbook.
I'm telling you, man, I've been mad about this textbook since
Davey's
I
like,
started
I'm
reading.
like, bro, Christians don't even understand Christianity in the first place. I'm like,
Themselves.
If
how
y'all
can you
read the
think that
Christian
you're up
chapter,
here when you don't even understand your own religion? Like,
Literally spin it to be your own narrative and then have the nerve to say someone else doesn't. I just want to say yes. And Davey, or I'm sorry, Artina, please finish that textbook. Like whatever you
Yeah.
got to do, whatever you need, let us know. We are here to support you, because even the most forward textbook that I've read when I was in an AP class, like you said, Davey, we were like, we have this many months. We skipped over the transatlantic slave trade like that. Like we learned a lot, and I'm fortunate, but it still wasn't told from the perspective of the people. Like we were fortunate enough to know about King Leopold and the slave trade in Congo, but like those gruesome, disgusting stories were like accounts of like white people observing what was happening, and it was just this fetishized like
like the American Revolution and whatnot, like that's seen as this like patriotic act, and then you see like the same undercurrents of what's going on right now with riots and looting, and people are like drawing similarities between the Boston Tea Party and the looting like targets. It's like, and you have the audacity to say that like that this isn't history in the making. This isn't actually like patriotism or reclaimed patriotism. It just people are only willing to accept history when it's whitewashed history. And say that we're learning from history, but the only way that we can learn from history is if it's whitewashed history.
I think Dr. Danielson is in the waiting room, so I'm going to tell them to let him in.
I think I'm in already.
Oh, is that him?
Yeah.
Hello, Dr. Danielson. How are you?
I'm not answering that question right now, but thanks for asking. And thank you for inviting.
Thank you for coming. I know you're very, very busy. I like the poster on your wall.
Me too.
Yeah. Inspired.
We've just been talking about education in the context of everything going on right now, and a lot of people being not being forced, but having to go backwards and do their own research on the history of these systems that we're fighting against, as opposed to making sure that things are being taught earlier in life, and not just from a whitewashed point of view, as Davey said. But you're joining mid-conversation, so I would just ask, have you noticed any differences between how history was taught for you, like American history or Black history, quote unquote Black history, and how it's being taught today?
I'm not in those classrooms as much today. I talk to teachers today, and my perception is that it is at least different. I am old enough to, I think, even then kind of feel like education was as much indoctrination as it was anything else. And so there are very strong memes or concepts that were like baked into a lot of history, like manifest destiny, that.
I remember that.
Western expansionism.
Right? This is what we get to try to extinguish in other people, is because, manifest, I don't even know what that meant, but those are the kinds of things that were really, really just suffused in a lot of the education when you're young. And I think spend as much time unlearning as you do learning, at least for me.
That's powerful. But why don't you introduce yourself?
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm Ben Danielson. I'm a pediatrician. I've worked at the Odessa Brown Children's Clinic, which is in the central area, kind of on Yesler. And I've been there for 20 years. And I don't know, I grew up a little bit in DC, a little bit in a rural community, and came out to Seattle after being in Boston for college. I came out to Seattle for medical school, and have stayed around ever since.
So one of the questions that I thought of earlier today, and I only have two, but one of the questions that I specifically thought about for you was going back to, you know, in the latter half of our conversation, we've been talking about race and the events following Ahmaud Arbery and George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, but going back to quarantine and COVID-19, as someone that has been treating patients of color, children of color for so many years in Seattle, what has it been like for you as someone in your field?
On some like very basic kind of almost technical level, you know, we redesigned our clinic pretty much in the end of February, and kind of understood some things coming into it. Number one, that the community we serve, which is 80% of the families we work with are on Medicaid, mostly low income, and fairly diverse for Seattle and the area around. I think we kind of recognized that, like every other major event, communities like ours are going to be hit the hardest, and so that we needed to think about that, and that led us into thinking a lot more about basic needs than fancy medicine. And so a big part of our effort was just changing the way we approached distributing food. Before the pandemic, we had sort of a pop-up food bank in our clinic building a few times a month, and families were able to just come and pick up food when they needed to. But it was only a few days a month. Once the pandemic was officially announced, we just moved into sort of a food distribution mode, delivering food to doors, delivering food to places where people came together, kind of pushing on, I hope this is okay to say, but the school system was distributing terrible food. And so working on getting them to try to replace that with better food and really think about nutrition. We turned food delivery even into the clinic visits that we had. It was just a good time to give out things like that. We started thinking more about infrastructure in ways that we hadn't before. We never used to do as much distributing of like the tools of technology, but realized really early on that I think it was 67,000 homes in King County lack internet access in any sustaining way. And all of a sudden there's all this talk about using technology to learn from home and just being homebound and needing tools, and realizing that of those 67,000, the majority of them were part of Black and Brown and Indigenous and communities of color. And so tried to ramp up our ability to deal with that and support that. We had a program called the Basic Needs Fund, where just we didn't name what it was for. A family explained what they needed, and we tried our best to fill it. So sometimes it's a simple thing like a school supply. Sometimes it's a place to sleep, a mattress, because you can't learn if you can't sleep well. Sometimes it was rent or a utility bill. And so we got in flow with those kinds of things. The programs that have been out there to help people sort of delay paying rent. The community I get to work with, families I work with are smart, and they know that just putting off a bill is not actually a benefit at all. To be hit with 4 times the bill in August instead of monthly bills is actually more likely to do more damage. But these are policies and programs that people who don't experience life try to make decisions about doing for, rather than really asking people how they need help. So we've been continuing to help pay rents, pay down bills, and try to find other options for families to find life somewhat affordable in this very unaffordable Northwest. And then we also did the medical stuff. Like we realized weekend Saturdays were the times when we could be sort of the cleanest clinic with no we created a clinic with no sick visits, just checkups, because babies still need to help with preventing things like whooping cough, and developmental assessments and other kinds of supports still need to happen. So we sort of tried to sort of make a cleaner space on Saturdays. It also fit well with families that are kind of stamped as essential workers, and I do mean stamped, so that they could still access healthcare for their kids at times when they weren't working. That kind of stuff. In many ways, though, even those simple things to say, the healthcare system is so rigid and so fixed that making even modest changes is sometimes monumental. Our staff did a lot of shifting. I don't know if that answers your question at all.
That was a great answer. I'll open the floor to Davie, TALAYA, ARTINA to ask him any questions that you might have.
Let me pull up some sticky notes because I believe that I had. I guess I could ask you about this. I don't know if this is something within your expertise, but I mentioned earlier that I was working on a video for immunocompromised people and trying to get my university to get microphones and recording equipment into every single class and every single department and not just STEM. So I guess if you could give me just kind of some insight on how some immunocompromised people that you've encountered and some of their experiences, and just kind of what does that community look like right now?
That is a really good and slightly complicated question in my mind. Sometimes my mind swims around. So I'll just rattle off a couple of things that come to mind. One that's slightly peripheral is that when you have a terrible person as president, he says things that are really harmful all the time, even the little things. So he mentions hydroxychloroquine, and suddenly this whole swath of people who have different kinds of chronic illnesses for which that medicine is actually known to be helpful, so the supply and the cost suddenly changes dramatically. And so folks who have immunocompromised status for many different reasons, suddenly not only they have food insecurity and housing insecurity, now they have medication insecurity to add into those layers. That's one space. We work with most of the young people with sickle cell in this region. I think something like 85% of the sickle cell youth come through our clinic. And in that population, there is a relative immunocompromise that happens with that as well. And the additional, like, sickling is mean. It responds to stress by causing flares. And so the combination of being more likely to have a sickle cell attack because of the stress of all that comes into this pandemic, and the socioeconomics and everything else that happens with that, the stress of just being socially isolated makes you more likely to worry about getting COVID-19, then makes you more likely to flare with your sickle cell. And if you're a family with sickle cell disease involved in it, I don't know if any of your families live with that on any level, but once you are sick, your immune system doesn't work as well. And so it can either way overreact or underreact. And either the virus like that can have its way without much control by your immune system, or your immune system can just react erratically instead of in a precision way, and then suddenly you can get a lot sicker. So just the worry that's created by something like this, and knowing that you have this double dose of risk, being Black and being having a chronic illness, is been a heavy burden for the young people we've been caring for. In other ways, immunocompromised folks often also have to take different kinds of medications to suppress or change their immunity, or to stave off other infections. And when you layer in a virus that seems to like to take advantage of folks who are already sick in some other way, then the threat to them is much more intense. The numbers and things that you all know very well by now, that if you're Black, if your primary language has been Spanish, if you're low income, if you're forced into an essential worker kind of role, and you have a chronic disease or immune compromised, then the risks are extremely high for you. Then the last thing I'll layer in there is it might not be about you being immune compromised, but it could be about someone you love being immune compromised. And this added pressure of, am I placing someone I care about at risk because of even the modest things I'm just doing to be alive, to be able to navigate and survive these strange days. That really messes with your sense of nurturing and caring, and your sense of connecting and connectedness. So we create not only immune compromise, but emotion compromised situations for whole families, not just individuals. And I guess I think about those things. Again, I'm not sure if that's helpful to you, but those are some random thoughts anyway.
Yeah, no, I'm sure you can hear see my computer screen, really, some typing notes up, I'm just trying to make this video as useful to immunocompromised people, because it is important to reach out to the university, but the story that I heard from my classmate who is immunocompromised, it's she just wants people to care, so I want to try and hit as many of the points in the video to show people on campus that, at least somebody does care, and that they can use their voices to maybe make more change than this, campaign video can do. But that's mostly what I want to do with this. So yeah,
You've probably already thought about what it means to not be able to protest because you have an immune compromised state, and how this illness and this uprising don't allow you to participate in the ways that you really care about. And so your social and your voice, your sense of being part of something important is also, so maybe you're immune compromised and politically compromised just because of that intersection.
Yeah. It's a tough situation to be in, tougher than I would have expected it to be for them.
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Danielson, I wanted to, did Davie or Talaya, did you guys have something you wanted to ask?
I did have a question. I think the current climate is bringing a lot of attention to the overwhelming funding for police departments. And as someone with a lot of family in the healthcare industry, my older brother is an ER nurse in San Francisco right now who can't come home because he would have to quarantine for 14 days and he's needed at work, and having aunties across the country and in the Philippines who don't have the proper PPE protection, the PPE for their work, and literally using, especially in the beginning, using garbage bags that they're bringing from home to protect themselves at work, because you can't, once you've interacted with one patient, you have to re-put everything on. So just seeing the lack of support and the lack of infrastructure necessary for healthcare workers, and then the, again, overwhelming support for this almost overnight immediate response for police to protesters, it was alarming and enraging. And I just want to know, what was your response? And what was your response to it? Because I don't know, it's a healthcare worker, I can't speak to that perspective.
As a human, I guess, what I went to really quickly was, I don't know if this is the right angle and why I thought about it this way, but just about that adage that that you invest in what you actually care about. And your words may say one thing, but what you really care about is where you invest. And we can't lie as a society about what we actually champion. When I think about the tiny bits I know of and I've learned of history, and the even reason that what we think of now as police were developed in the first place, and basically to control enslaved people and to protect property, which were enslaved people, and that investment remains such a huge part of our municipal budgets. And I think about the incredible business industry that is the incarceration system that starts so young, and how much financial weight that gives. And boy, it really makes you wonder if you pay a lot for a police force in order to feed a system that is one of the biggest industries in this country. There's some connection there that you have to think about. I'm not talking like a physician, I'm sorry. And from the perspective of healthcare, it has felt like an incredible crime to be asking a nurse, a frontline person who's in any kind of role that is in the path of higher risk for exposure to a deadly virus, and not give them the tools that they need to exist in that space with some level of safety it feels more emotionally hurtful than, even for me at least, the risk of exposure feels on one level. It's just, you want to think that if you're dedicating your career to something, if you're an ER nurse and you're putting your life into that and you're caring about that, and you've given up many, many other things, just hours of your life, or sleep, or other pursuits, or other dreams, you should feel like there's a system there that really has your back, that really supports you and honors you, and gives you what you need, at the very least, to be safe. I won't even talk about pay and wage disparity between what somebody like I, who is probably the lowest paid doctor in the whole business, compared to someone who's a nurse even, or a medical assistant, or anything else. That is already insult enough, but to not have the basic tools to stay safe, and to be not only asked, but expected, ordered, commanded, essentialized into having to walk back into that zone again and again and again is.
Is he frozen?
I think yeah.
Okay.
Cut out for a second.
It's okay, he'll come back.
Yeah.
Words of what he was saying though, for real.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just like, I just remember like the first conversation I had like with my brother. It was like a few or so weeks like into quarantine, like after school shut down, but we still didn't really know what that meant and stuff. And like it still hadn't like hit like my brain that like this was a global pandemic that was taking like as many lives as it has taken in the US today. And he called me and he's like, I'm on my way into work and it's getting really bad, and I just want you to like be strong for like mom and dad. And I was like, he's literally risking his life. Like he's literally risking his life. And he's risking his life for other people's lives right now, and he's not fully protected. And I know that the reason why he's at risk isn't just because he's in a space where people with COVID are, but it's because he doesn't have the proper protection. So like that question is like, it's personal for me in ways I didn't even understand at first. And yeah, just seeing how much money can go into the US defense budget in comparison to every other part of municipal budgets, every part of the federal government's budget, just it shakes you to your core, because it's like, how is that more important than basic necessities? How is the US using our economy to establish some sort of like bully pulpit over other nations? Because if you think about it, like the only place where the US finishes first is like in our defense, in our military. So we've scared and fear-mongered other countries into thinking that they're less than, just like our government has done that to our people with racism and oppression, into thinking that they're less than, into thinking, or into allowing us to think that we're less than. It's just, it's not right.
Yeah, I saw what you said, like just about houselessness and the fact that if we just cut a small amount of our budget, we could literally cure it all. And it's like the fact that they just refuse is that it must be intentional. It's like it has to be wanted by our leaders for people to suffer, and that's the only answer, because it just doesn't make sense. Like you said, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense that our healthcare workers, they're clapping and applauding and doing these TV specials and thanking them, but it's so disrespectful that they just can't have what they need to be safe when it's very possible. Yeah.
And it's because, like, so long as there are people suffering, those people who are suffering are always going to need to look towards a government for help, or always going to need to look towards our social systems and infrastructure for help, because they have nowhere else to turn to.
Yeah.
Well, that's job security for those who are elected officials or are in the public and private sector as well. Like, let's not forget of like Jeff Bezos he's on his way to his, like, the fact that you can have that much money and 50 million or something, like, is a drop in the bucket, and you can't even find it within you to, like,
just do it. Like, he could save the world.
Literally.
Yeah. He could save the entire world. He could fix every known issue known to man. And he just is like, you know.
What's the point of having money if you're not going to help people with it?
And the fact that people really have the nerve to, like, defend him and say that he earned it, it's like, you don't earn that much money. It's not possible. Yeah. It's like, you don't earn $330,000 every single day or every minute or whatever insane number that is. It's like, and then have people work 15 an hour.
Yeah, because the people who are actually earning it are the people who are working in, you know, you can think about, like, as like
it funnels, right? Yeah, it funnels.
Like, he's up here, right? But the people who are doing the majority of the work, that's making up the majority of his profit or all of his profit, are down here. So working,
and it's hard labor at that. It's not even like they're just sitting on the phone. It's like they're standing on their feet for 10 hours at a time, peeing in bottles. Like, that's insane. And I think the thing that makes me frustrated is that he doesn't even pay taxes. Like, how does Amazon get away with not paying taxes? I would almost be okay with the wealth hoarding if they just paid their share and contributed to society like every single other working American citizen or working person, because undocumented citizens pay taxes as well. You know, like, it's just crazy.
Yeah, 100%. Dr. Danielson, you got cut off. Yeah, it's okay. Do you want to, like, fill in and continue with your statement?
I like what I'm hearing here too. But wherever you want to go, I'm happy to go. I was talking too much anyway. You know, I did want to say about what you were just saying. You know, people don't realize that many hospitals are nonprofit, which means they don't have to pay taxes. And the whole deal was supposed to be that the taxes they didn't have to pay were supposed to be funneled back into communities that they serve, called community benefit. And most nonprofit hospitals, like the one I work for, makes a profit. So when it's not giving PPE to its staff, it's making a profit, and it's not paying its taxes. And it is just as much part of that machine as Amazon is on some level. Maybe not the same numbers, but anyway, interesting.
Where does that profit tend to go to? Like they're higher up, like their board members, or
Their executive suite. Yeah, those folks make they make banks.
I have a question for you. My my mom she's a stenographer at UW, and she was just feeling very alone and frustrated because she is the only African American woman in her entire department, including her doctors. And like a lot of them are just like, oh, we hear you, we support you. But then she's like, okay, come to the march. And they're all like, well, I don't know, I'm so sorry. And like, she just felt like, she told me the other day, she was like, I just feel so alone. Like, I'm a Black woman and this could happen to any one of my family members. COVID and the racial pandemic that we're in. And I guess what would you say that is like do you feel like our efforts are going to be enough? Like, do you feel like maybe we can somewhat work past this epidemic of racism and just like, do you think that we are going in the right direction, or do you feel like we need to do more? Like, what would you say from your professional experience?
Part of me wants to say, like, think like an activist and say, this is a chance to make the kinds of demands that you weren't able to make a few months ago. I want to say there are different kinds of responses going on now than I guess I would have expected. So that takes a little of my skepticism away. There's at least, the number of statues torn down around the world, the number of, even here, sort of weak, but at least present apologies from that form of enslavement called the NFL is just something is different than the response. The serious conversations about redesigning law enforcement, at least the conversations it's different. So I need to acknowledge that, because otherwise I do feel kind of skeptical about just lots of talk. And every organization, you can't go through like you can't get coffee without someone showing you their statement about like just how abhorrent and terrible racism is. I don't know where those voices were 6 months ago or a year ago or 10 years ago. Suddenly that just doesn't feel sincere to me. But I want to ask you whether this feels like something might happen that's bigger, that's more sustaining.
I think so. Personally, yeah. Like, yeah, it's just the technology that we have today. Like, it's so interesting realizing when I was younger, like I wasn't able to really participate in protests and marches because my mom was just like, we don't really do that. Like, we are safe, we're warm, we're here, we don't need to go fight on the front lines. But she was protesting, I've been protesting, like even being able to follow like police scanners on Twitter, just like things like small, really useful tools like that, I think is what's gonna make this round different. But I don't think it'll be the last round. I do feel like COVID has really affected things because people are in the house and on nothing but their phones. So it's like, it's easier to get angry and say, okay, what am I gonna do, versus, oh, well, I have all this work to do and I'm just too tired and busy to care so much, which is what it felt like the last time we had this kind of uprising of American anger and frustration at the government or at the way that Black people and brown people are being treated. So I feel like it's different this time, but unfortunately, I don't think it'll be the last time. I think especially once the country really starts to reopen, people are gonna get busy again, and it's just gonna have to go one more round or two more. Like Davie said, I don't, maybe not in our lifetime, but it's definitely different.
I also would like to build off that. I definitely don't think this will be the last time, but I also think this one is different because we're the ones who are writing this history. I'm a big history nut, as y'all could tell, but like, we're the ones who have the information. No one is controlling it because everyone is filming. Everyone is posting everywhere. So you can see, the recount of history just on your phone or on your computer, So I think that's one of the really, really big differences. So
I think
Appreciate
also it's like a predominantly youth-led movement right now. Like the people on the front lines are, I'm 18 and they're younger than me. Like that is promise because those people, us, basically Gen Z is like leading the way. And at this time we're like, we ain't got nothing to lose. And we're willing to ride this, not just ride this wave out, but see it into our adulthood and see into our, if we bring children to the world, see it into their childhood. So yeah, it's definitely something that there will be, like COVID, there will be other waves, but we'll be there for those waves and make sure that they happen.
and looking out as a like just a older like pediatrician in a community clinic, how can I be of service to your leadership?
I think the biggest thing that I can ask of like any adult is like respecting youth voices, because just because someone is younger than you, and Majestic and I have like had extensive conversations about this, it's like just because you're younger doesn't mean that you have anything less valid to say, because yes, we might not have the same amount of experience because we literally haven't lived the same amount of time, but our lived experience is just as impactful in who we are today, and being respected for those experiences is important. So that would definitely be like a general thing, but showing up like you have been, like for the community, giving out those resources, food, shelter, anything that anyone needs, where school districts don't have the ability to give out because they're already spread very thin. And I've had conversations with our superintendent like board about what the next, even just like 2 years are going to look like, and we're going into like a major deficit for schools. We don't know what type of budget we're going to have for our students. So community resources and banding together as one for the community is going to be incredibly important to make sure that people can continue to get educated, make sure youth can continue to get educated at schools, and live their lives as well. So yeah, that's best advice I can say from my experience. Yeah.
I just want to share something positive, a positive experience I had this week. So I go to a church called New Beginnings Christian Fellowship, really progressive. It's Baptist. They support the LGBTQ community. Like they're pretty forward thinking for a predominantly Black Christian church. However, there's often times where the pastor will be on the stage, the youth choir, and these youth don't know nothing about this. Go look this up when you get home. And we're just like, really? Like, seriously? And it just doesn't feel good. And a lot of they pride that they have a lot of youth, but they still talk down about us very often. But recently that we had our music worship arts ministry had a Zoom call, and it's like all the elders. Most of them are probably over 60. Some of them are very senior. And I was so interested. I was so inspired to hear that they said the opposite. They were like, our youth right now, like they're really stepping up. Because I was like, okay, I'm just gonna be brave and say that please listen to your nephews, listen to your grandchildren. Like we are so tapped in and we are carrying on this fight for you. And I think once I was able to really acknowledge their experience and acknowledge that we still are listening to them, but we are doing this for you, it was like their minds, they were just like, okay, yeah, you're right. Like maybe we shouldn't only watch CNN and get our info from there. Like maybe we should ask our nephews. And so it was really inspiring to see someone that's like 80 years old say like defund the police. Like it was just really, really encouraging to see. So although we're still gonna have opposition as young people, because people like consistency. People like doing the same thing over and over and not changing it. And people like to be comfortable, but I think there are a lot of older people that have changed their minds and are realizing like, okay, we got to do something very different. So yeah, I just want to share that.
Thank you.
You just reminded me of something, Talaya. I think one of the reasons why I'm really grateful to have known Dr. Danielson for as long as I have is he's always talked to me eye to eye. He never talked down to me from like, I don't know how little I was when I first started seeing him. But I think having someone like him, especially not growing up, like having growing up without a father, he was one of my he was one of those figures in my life, and that I know that that is a role that he plays in the community that he serves, and I know how important that is. It's people like him that are the reason why I feel empowered to tell people that are older than me when they're wrong, or when they're not listening, or when they need to listen. like just listen to people who are younger than you. Listen to people who you might not know. Best experience that I've had throughout all this was this past Sunday, I think, when I met with BLM, had a meeting with Mayor Durkin, and I was a guest, and I got to hear just see the agenda play out, and watch them discuss their demands and whatnot. And I asked if I could say something, and I texted Davie, because I was like, I feel like I'm the youngest person in this room. I feel like I have to say something. Like, what should I say? And she reminded me to let the mayor know that we vote, and that we after everything that we've seen, hopefully there will be this rush of voter registration amongst young people, and not just focusing on the presidential election, but on your local elections and city council members and mayoral elections. And I could tell that it was a very important thing for her to hear, and it was just a moment that I had, that I was like, okay, this is a moment where, like, it's not because we've all dealt with adults that have sort of paraded youth around and said, look at all the youth that I work with and that I bring into my meetings and take pictures with. But we've all had experiences where we've left those meetings and been like, did anyone actually listen to what I had to say? So I think just going back to your question of how you can serve us is just keep doing what you do and empowering young people and young patients to realize that their voice matters, and empower your coworkers and people that you work with and other healthcare professionals to do the same.
Thank you. Thank you.
Ditto.
I would, let me check the time real quick. Yeah, we have time. I want to touch on mental health. And I don't really know, there's so much, there's far too much to be upset about, saddened by, confused by going on in the world right now. So mental health it's just, I don't even really know how to start the conversation. When at your level and in your profession and in the context of everything going on, what would be your advice to not even just us, but hopefully young people that are watching this, on how they can maintain their mental health throughout, these next couple of weeks in the summer?
That might be one. It's funny, I was almost thinking of asking a version of that question of you as well, in terms of sort of what keeps you well, what keeps you strong. And maybe then maybe this is a shared answer as well. You also just had me thinking, Majestic, about how just under invested we are in mental health services, and that whole connection to, we've created just a heavily armed police force to respond to everything that is going on in people's lives. Just one massively militarized response, and you all know, like, the proportions of those calls that are really just about someone suffering and it coming out of their body. And we have our lived experience as communities here with Charlene and with so many other stories of a militarized response to someone who is in some form of an emotional and mental health crisis. And again, when you think about what we are and aren't investing in, and how that translates to who we do and don't value, how we don't even yet start as older adults to talk about neurodiversity, about the diversity of mental health, not just the pathology of you're either well or you aren't, that sort of binary switch. It baffles me in this age that we are still so, I don't know, so backwards in our thinking about that. And I think this time does force you to recognize that trauma and stress and our responses to it, the things that help us get through it even, they all impact us not only on a physical body level, but also on an emotional and social level. And that this lie of separation between what is your medical health needs and what are your mental health needs is laid out blatantly as not only false, but an inhibitor of getting the right support that everyone deserves. We still also have enough stigma with this in our communities, right, that make it so hard to be able to even talk honestly about things sometimes. It just feels like that has to be on the list of demands. It falls so easily into the conversation of defunding police, because one of the reasons to defund police is to fund what's actually needed, what's actually loving and supportive and beneficial and connecting about what makes a truly beloved community a community. And so I just think that just has to be so woven into our conversations right now. And that's not even the question that you're asking, because I think that the question you're asking is also sort of in the absence of good, systematic and enriching and recognizing and respectful and dignifying support. What are we left to do for ourselves and for each other? And I think just the consciousness of the reality of the toll that this time takes on us, regardless of how strong we see ourselves, has to be front of mind, has to be something that we are actually treating for ourselves. I don't know if treating is the right word, but managing, supporting, helping. And after this, whatever this after is, there is an accumulation of something in our bodies, something stressful, something erosive on some level. And we need the right kinds of spaces to heal from and through that as well. There's an amazing brother named Sean Ginwright, who I'm probably almost inappropriately quoting, who's up out of Oakland. And his whole thing is about healing, trauma and healing. And I was talking with him just today, and just talking to him was sort of healing for me, but also where he was centering conversations about, we can't think about individual suffering, we have to think about community suffering. We can't think about just anti-racism, which was kind of pushing me, because that's where my mind's at. It's like, as soon as you're thinking about what you want in relationship to what you hate, then you're still in relationship to what you hate, which was just a little, like encouraging to think bigger and beyond and outside of maybe where I'm still limited. And I say all of that just because he's an amazing, inspirational person. And if you have a chance to hear or see him, it's worth it. But also that part of managing mental health now is maintaining a vision of a really hopeful and incredible and so different that it's even hard to fully imagine kind of future. And we have to hold that strong during these times. Do not ask me how I got to that point, but that's what I was thinking. What would you say about this sort of how to be well when society is unwell?
How to be well when society is unwell. I don't know, I'll have to think about that. What do you guys think?
I mean, like, this is probably something that I just learned from my counselor, and I don't know if this is an effective way to think about it, but try and bring your mindset outside of external things and just focus on yourself, you know, and what's currently happening. You know, like my counselor is like, touch your surroundings, you know, and like see what else is in your environment. Try and put yourself in the current present situation that you are physically in, you know, and that will probably help, you know, maybe short term, you know, but in the moment when you're really feeling it and need a second to de-stress. Yeah. And something I guess that I've been doing just to separate myself mentally from the whole racial movement is just I'll lay in my bed and just be like, hey, look, I'm getting rid of all my labels. I'm not Black. I'm not even Artina right now. Like, I am just a human being or a spirit or whatever I am that just exists right now, you know, so.
Wow.
I don't mean to ignore or say ignore your problems or disassociate from the world, but sometimes you kind of need it.
Yeah. Good. Thank you.
Something that helps me is like just taking on another art form or another form of expression that you don't normally do. I'm a musician and that's my job as well. And my problem is I love it so much that I consider it work and play. And that is not always healthy. It's like, you know, being a medical professional, I'm sure part of what you like to do is to read articles and listen to talks and kind of, you know, submerge yourself into whatever your work, or even Davie, like I'm sure, you know, everybody has their thing that they just love. And sometimes we do it too much. And it's like, I've started painting and I'm bad at it. Well, I wouldn't say I'm bad at it. I'm not as good as I would like to be, but it makes me feel really relaxed. Something about watercolor, like just seeing water on a page just really relaxes me. And so I guess just trying something new, or even gardening, like I just like to walk around and look at people's flowers. And I know it's weird because they're probably like, what is this lady touching my flower in my yard and talking to it? Like, is she crazy? Does she need help? Like, but I don't know. I like to think of plants as other life forms, and sometimes they enjoy a conversation, you know, just quirky, silly things that you might not think of. But I don't know. It's really helped me to like realize that, you know, our human experience is jarring and traumatic and beautiful and wonderful all at the same time, but we are not the only things on this planet. And that can also put things into perspective, like, wow, there's a lot more around me than just what I'm suffering from. So yeah.
My wife would agree with you on that one.
Really?
Sorry. I think one of the hardest things, I think I've been going through trial and error and like diagnosing myself and thinking that I'm taking care of myself, and then realizing, oh no, I'm not taking care of myself. I've had a lot of recurring nights where I'm like, okay, I'm going to get sleep, going to go to sleep now, and I just see something that happened in the world or something that's going on locally that I need to address, and I'm getting 3 hours of sleep, and the most jarring part of this experience, this moment that we are experiencing, is I think when I do get sleep, when I wake up, there's this half second where I don't know where I am, you know, and then everything starts coming back, and then you start remembering what's going on, and that's the part that starts to become tiring. Every time, that's the part, that's when I realized that I don't have the balance that I need, because we have to take care of ourselves, not just momentarily, but we have to make sure that we can wake up tomorrow and keep doing the work that has to be done. Right. And that might take that many different forms. It's different for everyone, but that's a big realization that I had is when I get to a point, if I get to a point where I wake up in the morning and I think, oh, and I'm like, pessimistic or negative, and I'm resenting the work that I'm trying to do, then I don't have the right balance, because we should have the mindset, or ideally have a mindset somewhat about like, I get to affect change today. I get to organize this thing. I get to go to this event. So balance has been really the word of the week, and I'm still trying to figure out exactly what form that takes. But that'd be my 2 cents.
That's great. Thank you.
I think I had one last question. So we're coming to the end of our time. Dr. Danielson, a while ago, I watched your commencement at UW 2018. And as Davie will be officially graduating tomorrow, I was just wondering, what words would you give to people who, not just graduates, but young people, whoever may be watching, that is going through this realization of, oh, this is the world I'm coming into. What would you say, if you think about what you said at the last commencement, and how the world has shifted and evolved, would you change anything? Would you do those same words, still hold the weight, or have you had to readdress how you talk to young people about maintaining their hope and their inspiration? What would you say to young people right now?
Well, even after this conversation, it reinforces messages that feel important to me, and hopefully to someone else, about there have perhaps not been many other generations that have had a chance to consciously know themselves stepping into leadership, stepping into the front of important causes, and know that those causes are going to be better because you are stepping into those spaces. I feel I've heard some version of that today, and I've heard that in other young voices, and I think that is a gift of clarity and purpose that is worth cherishing on some level. I think that there's got to be something, and I'm sure there's probably a very perfect metaphor that I can't think of right now, about the path for incredible change comes from incredible turbulence, and we must be headed towards something really, really incredible, because this time is so shaken up. It is completely shaken up, and within that shaking means you step into spaces where you define who you are relative to them, whether that's the title that you choose to bear, that's way different than any selection of titles that are offered to anyone in any previous time, or the relationship that you choose to bring with you, a different kind of leader or leadership, a different approach to decision making, a different way of transforming the people and the places and the things around you. It's all shaken up, and the opportunity for you to name where you are in the world is, I think it's really different than a lot of previous generations who came through and had this sort of now what question going through their heads, even as they walk through maybe a commencement line or something. Now what? Oh my God, I was putting all of this into this moment. Now what? I think I've heard that with some level of just truly uncertainty and almost paralysis in previous generations. In this moment, I think it's much more of a different kind of like, now what? Like, what now? What do I want to take on now? Because I've shown my skills. I've been through this time. I've done this. I've adapted. I've been in the lead. I've been the voice of this moment. Now what? I think I would just think about those 2 words in such a differently powerful way. And I'm sorry you had to go through that commencement speech, Majestic.
It was good. You did a great job. I thought it was really good. But I think I want to honor your schedule. I know you're very busy. It's 8:01 now, so I'm gonna conclude this official recorded meeting. Thank you very much.